Hi, I'm Andrew Skurka, former thru-hiker, guidebook author, now mountain guide. Today we're going to be talking about tents, including how to buy one, performance characteristics, materials. This will be a weekly series with the trek. If there are other topics that you'd like me to cover, or if you have questions about this particular video, please leave a comment below. I've been backpacking for over 20 years, so I started in my early 20s and I'm now in my mid 40s. In that time, I have used dozens of tents, probably not hundreds, but I have also set up like thousands of tents that my clients have brought with me. I've also backpacked in all conditions. I've backpacked back east, I've backpacked in Alaska, I've backpacked in the Mountain West and the Southwest. So I have a really good understanding of tents and their pros and cons and what makes one tent good and another tent not so good. My first real backpacking trip was the Appalachian Trail in 2002. And at that time, backpacking gear was not that great. And I started off with a double wall tent with poles, and it was heavy. And I was trying to hike from Georgia to Maine. So like a couple hundred miles in, I was like, I've got to lighten up. And I bought a waterproof, breathable outdoor research bivy sack and then hiked with that for the remainder of the trail. And it was awful. Can you imagine being it's basically like a body condom, for lack of a better description. And I am hiking the Appalachian Trail in like June, July, August, and I'm in these like hot, humid conditions in places like New Jersey, New York, Connecticut. And I just remember at night, and like the bugs are out at night, and like I have this like netting that was right up against my face, so they would bite through the netting. And my solution to that was that I had like a gallon-sized Ziploc bag that I would put next to my face to protect me from the bug netting. Of course, that wasn't very comfortable. So yeah, awful shelter, learned a lot. I've never used one since. If you pick the wrong shelter, like at worst, it could be, I don't want to be like hyperbolic, but like you could die if you pick the wrong shelter, but more likely you're just going to be uncomfortable. So like because you're not going to have the protections or the performance that you're really wanting. So like, for example, maybe you pick a lightweight shelter that doesn't have any bug netting and you're out there with a bunch of bugs. So now bugs are crawling on you or they're biting you because they're the flying insect thing. Or maybe you pick a shelter that is really heavy, but you're trying to do because it's large and it has lots of interior room, but you're trying to do a thru hike, in which case you're carrying all that extra weight, like many thousands of miles. Before you purchase a shelter, I would recommend doing a little bit of homework and understanding the conditions that you will likely encounter during all or most of your backpacking trips. And if you're doing something that's like very targeted, so for example, if you're doing a thru hike, it's worth getting a shelter that's very specific to those conditions. Whereas if you're looking for a little bit more of a general purpose shelter, something that you can backpack in the east with, that you can backpack in the west with, because it's a little bit more like weekend warring or like week-long vacations, then what you're looking for changes a little bit. But again, do some research, and you'd be looking at the key things are there flying insects or crawling insects? What kind of wind would you likely be encountering? How much precipitation? How much humidity, or like average humidity? And then the last thing, this would be a little bit more of an extreme use case, but are you going to be looking at any snow loads? If I were to explain the difference in tent materials to a 5-year-old, I don't have kids, this is challenging me here. Let me just start off with the most basic. So if you go into an outdoor retail store like an REI, or if you get a shelter from one of the larger manufacturers, like say a Big Agnes or an MSR, it's going to be a nylon, so a ripstop nylon, and it's going to be coated on one side with polyurethane, and it's going to be coated on the other side with silicone. Silicone is the better waterproofing coating, but polyurethane they like to do because they can then seam tape with like actual tape. It looks like Scotch tape and will adhere to the polyurethane. So that silicone polyurethane nylon, it's okay. It's economical. It performs fairly well. It can be seam taped, but it's definitely not like a premium grade material. So let me bump up from there. Next thing you could do is you could get a also coated nylon. It'd be silicone on one side, silicone on the other, and this would be referred to as maybe like a silicone impregnated nylon. And that material is typically going to be stronger and more waterproof than the first material I described. And by the way, it's clear that this is not suitable for a 5-year-old.
A really smart 5-year-old.
let me go on. So stronger and more waterproof than the first material, but the problem with silicone, like a silicone nylon, is that it can't be seam taped. So that's where you have to do this, the seam sealing. It's this very messy process. If the manufacturer that you're buying it from offers the option of getting it seam sealed already, just pay them to do it. It's worth it. Because otherwise you're out there on a warm day with a little paintbrush and this goopy tube of glue, and you're having to coat all of the seams to keep them waterproof, and that way the rain doesn't get through. So that's that fabric. Like, that's a great fabric. There's some really premium versions of that. For example, like a Mountain Laurel Designs will be promoting or like a Seek Outside, they use like a really premium silicone nylon. That is the best material for trips where you're anticipating snow regularly or occasionally, because that silicone is super slippery. So the snow is more likely to just sort of like slide off of the silicone. Another related material would be sil-poly, which is silicone coated polyester. And this has been, like, we started seeing this maybe like 5 years ago, maybe a few more than 5 years ago, so it's a little bit more recent. It performs similarly to the silicone coated nylons, or the silicone polyurethane nylons. The big difference between the sil-poly and the sil nylons is that the sil-poly doesn't stretch quite as much. That's kind of one of the problems with the sil nylons. When it gets wet, and I know technically that silicone or that polyurethane is not supposed to allow the moisture to make its way into the nylon itself, but somehow it does. I don't really know the mechanism. And then it stretches. So you might wake up in the middle of the night, if on like a rainy night, and you're like, why is my shelter like, looks like it's caving in on me? And it just needs to be, you just need to readjust it and to like get it taut again. So the sil-poly is a little bit more stretch resistant. That fabric you're only going to see with cottage companies. And by the cottage companies, I mean like the direct to consumer, like basically like the Durston Gears of the world. And then the last type of fabric, and this is very, very different than the ones I've been talking about so far. This is a DCF, or dynamic composite fabric. If you're old like me, you might still refer to it as Cuban fiber. And Cuban fiber, it's like imagine like a grid of spectracord, or like, what do they call it, HDPE? I don't think I've got that acronym right. But it's basically like this material, this fiber that's stronger than steel for its weight. It's like the strongest fiber in the world. And they make this grid of this material, and then they basically dunk it in painter's plastic material. So it ends up being this like super non-stretchy, super waterproof material. And it really is, it's this amazing fabric because it's stronger than the nylons. It's more waterproof than the nylons. It doesn't stretch like the nylons, but man, it's expensive. So you're going to be, for like 2 identical shelters, one available in a silicone impregnated nylon, one available in a DCF, it's usually, I don't know, like add 50% probably to the cost. But if you can afford it, and if you're planning on using it a bunch, like, it's probably worth it. The only instance in which I would not recommend DCF is if you expect to be in a lot of snow, because it just doesn't perform well in that environment. And the other extreme use case that I've seen where DCF becomes a liability if you're going to see hail. The DCF shelters, they get like drum tight. And if you get hail, especially like bigger pieces of hail, it can literally just like puncture the shelter. So some of you who are watching may be familiar with this story of one of my trips up in Alaska, where the group had this epic hailstorm, and a lot of the DCF shelters looked like Swiss cheese by the end of that storm. But again, extreme use case, not something most people need to be concerned about. There are lots of different ways that you could divide the tents, like what's available on the market. You could go by fabrics. You could go by whether it's single wall, double wall. Another category that you could use would be whether it has a dedicated pole set or whether it's pitched using trekking poles. So tents that have a dedicated pole set, that's more of your conventional look, be kind of like domey looking. And the big advantage of tents with dedicated pole sets, one is that they're pretty foolproof. Like you could give one of those tents to a 5-year-old, and the 5-year-old probably would be capable of putting it together. In fact, not that different than like the child play sets that you might put in a basement. So that's a big advantage. And for someone who doesn't backpack a lot, or someone who's not that concerned about weight, just because they're not concerned about hiking a lot of miles on their trip, like that's fine. It makes it really easy. It's like kind of foolproof. It's nice. The other big advantage, though, from a performance perspective of the tents with dedicated pole sets is that you end up getting way more interior room for the footprint. because you have those vertical walls. So imagine like if you're gonna use like a hoop tent, so it's kind of like a silo, like a barn silo on its side, and like half a cylinder on its side. The walls can be like perfectly vertical, so you can be in your tent even if it's this narrow, but it could go over my head and it could feel like it has lots of interior room. With the trekking pole tents, the big advantage here is weight. Like you're already carrying trekking poles, and typically a pole set's gonna be like 8 to 12 ounces depending on how big the shelter is and depending on what the poles are made out of. So you're saving yourself quite a bit of weight. And then, but that's kind of it for advantages, because the big disadvantage is that with trekking poles tents, the slope angles, the walls typically are not very steep. There's just almost no way to avoid it. So with a lot of trekking pole tents, you end up with issues of like bumping up against the sidewalls with either your head or your feet or your left side, right side. There are some solutions to that. Like, so you've seen some innovative tent geometries from, say, like, like the Durston X-Mid. Him putting that sleeping angles asymmetrically to the trekking poles was a way of fixing some of that. The difference between a single wall tent and a double wall tent is that with a single wall tent, the rain fly and the bug netting they're attached to each other. And whereas with a double wall tent, you have like an outer shell of waterproof tent fly, and then inside you have more of that bug netting material. Single wall tents, they are lighter weight because they use less material. They're also, I find them just easier to set up because you just stake out those corners, put that trekking pole up, or maybe 2 trekking poles up, and boom, there's your whole shelter. Whereas a double wall tent, you have 2 pieces to set up, and with a lot of double wall tents, you have to set up the inner before you can put the fly on top. And if it's raining out, there's this precarious couple of minutes where water is just dumping into the inner of your tent. The big advantage of double wall tents is that they provide a like physical guard against touching the interior walls of the waterproof section. So imagine if you're in a single wall tent and it's humid out because you're hiking the Appalachian Trail in the summer and it's raining, and then you're breathing and your breath has moisture in it, and maybe you have some gear inside your shelter that's drying out because it got wet during the day. There's just so much moisture inside your shelter, and often the interior wall of the fly it'll start to form condensation. And if you're bumping up against the inner of the tent, either with a sleeping bag or maybe a shoulder or an elbow or your head, you're going to get wet. Whereas with a double wall tent, what you're touching is the fly fabric, the mesh, so you're protected from that exterior. But that all said, the makers of double wall tents will say, well, like, you don't have the condensation issues that you get with single wall, and that's that's total BS. Whether you end up with condensation inside your shelter is much more a function of the ambient climate conditions. So that situation I just described a second ago, it's raining, it's high humidity, you're breathing, you have drying gear inside your shelter. There's just so much moisture inside your shelter. And then you add to that some cooler outside air that is cooling that rainfly. You're absolutely going to get condensation on the inside of your shelter. It does not matter who makes it, what material they make it, whether it's single wall, whether it's double wall, you're going to get condensation on the inside of your shelter. The best solution to avoiding condensation on the inside of your shelter, one is going to be airflow. So anytime that you can open up your shelter and let it breathe. So for example, like on a nice night, open both doors. Don't just shut nature out. Open those doors. Also, if you can, if it's not real windy, try to pitch your shelter a little higher off the ground in order to get some perimeter airflow. That will also really help. If you don't have any bugs, not only leave the rain fly doors open, but even just leave open the bug mesh. So open the netting. I think that netting is very deceiving. You would look at it and you would think that air would travel really easily from a humid interior to a drier exterior. But on calm nights, I'm always shocked at how much heat and humidity manages to get trapped by that bug mesh. So again, if you're not dealing with bugs, open up that door and just let nice free flow of air come in and out. The other thing you can do to avoid condensation inside is that you want to be really selective about where you camp. And back east, it's a little bit less of an issue back east, or I'll say like more broadly like eastern woodlands. So anytime you're camping in a forest, especially in the summertime when there's a tree canopy, that's going to be a relatively like warmer, drier camping area when you have a tree canopy. It's more of an issue out west where there's more alpine travel, there's more subalpine, and then the forests themselves are a little bit more spaced out. They just don't, in the west, we don't get the amount of moisture that falls back east, so our forests just aren't quite as dense. So when you're picking a campsite, you want to be looking for areas where there's thermal cover. By thermal cover, I'm talking about any kind of like canopy or physical barrier that will help trap some of the radiant heat or bounce back radiant heat at you. So for example, if you can, and you can feel it, you can like just do a little A/B test. Pick a campsite underneath a like big, beautiful ponderosa pine next to a meadow. And in the morning, walk out into the meadow and you will notice that there's like a 5 or 10 degree temperature difference between where you camped underneath that ponderosa pine and the meadow. Another thing you can do, in addition to thermal cover, you could find campsites that are not like in the bottom of things. Because if you're camped in like the bottom of a valley, if you're camped next to a lake, if you're camped in the bottom of a canyon, that's where all that cold air gathers at night, especially on like calmer nights. And I don't want to, it would take me longer than 10 minutes maybe to go into like all the physics at play here, but basically like it's a cold sink. That's a way to think of it. So if you're camped along a creek, cold air collects in that creek just like the water does, and cold air has a lower humidity, or condensation will form more quickly in colder temperatures. So not only are you camping in a cold place, but you're camping in a place where there's more likely to be humidity. The feature that comes to mind that I remember thinking like, oh, that's cute, were the LED lights inside the tents.
Kind of groovy.
Yeah, like, and I think I'm reluctant to say that it's not necessary, because if you're going out on a weekend-long backpacking trip just to get away from work and from scrolling and maybe your cats that keep you up all night long, I'm not projecting or anything. Yeah, it's nice to have a shelter with like LED lights on the inside. Sounds kind of fun. The importance of weight when you're shopping for shelter will really depend on what type of backpacking you're doing. And this applies not just to shelters, but to all backpacking gear. Think about there are two extreme types of backpacking. There are what you might call like backcountry campers. And for them, it's just about like getting out into nature. They're not that worried about covering miles and like seeing lots of things. They're not looking to set FKTs. They're not trying to do a thru hike. It's just like a break from normal life. And maybe it's more about good company. Maybe it's more about like an extracurricular activity like fishing or birding or photography. Maybe it's like just some family time away from screens, whatever it might be. But basically you're a backcountry camper where you are in the backcountry, but you're not hiking very far. You're not hiking very fast. In that case, you can carry plenty of weight. In fact, I would actually recommend it. If you're planning on a backcountry camping trip where you're going to hike, say, I don't know, like 5 or 10 miles a day, and you bring some ultralight shelter, or a flat tarp or an A-frame tarp that's more suitable for a thru hiker, you're going to be like kind of mad at yourself, because on a trip like that, it's really nice to have a big shelter with lots of interior space. You can invite a buddy and play some cards. If it's rains all day, you can hang out in there and like write in your journal or listen to podcasts or whatever it might be, but like lots of interior space. You won't regret it. The other extreme type of backpacker would be kind of like a thru hiker. And I know there's variation through hikers, but someone who's more like miles driven, like miles obsessed sometimes. And for them, they wake up at dawn, they start hiking, and they finish hiking at dusk. Like every ounce in their pack matters. They're carrying it for hundreds, if not thousands of miles. So that's kind of your other extreme backpacker. And for them, weight really should be a high priority. You should be, for that type of backpacker, you should be trying to carry the lightest shelter you can that gives you the protections that you need.
So I'm going to hit you with some trails. I want to know what tent you would bring. Let's start with the AT.
I think I would bring a hammock. I think on the AT, and I know hammocks aren't as popular as they were like 5 or 10 years ago. There are so many trees and there are so many bad campsites. So you elevate yourself off the ground, get away from the rocks and the roots and the undergrowth, get away from the rodents. You have a shelter that has fantastic ventilation And you can camp almost anywhere along the AT if you have a hammock. I think for the PCT and the CDT it'd be the same. So I'm a little old school, so I probably would still go with I probably would go with an A-frame tarp, with the expectation that I will almost never have to set it up, and like a small 5x8 A-frame tarp. And I probably would also bring like a water-resistant bivy sack just for a little bit of wind protection and bug protection. And that's what I'm going to sleep in most nights. I'm not even going to bother setting up my shelter. That would fall into that same category. I think the one exception I would make to that A-frame tarp bivy sack recommendation is if you want to have a cocoon around you every night, then I think the solution, and this is what most people do, to be honest, is that they're going to go with a single wall tent. It's going to be a Z-Pax duplex or a HMG mid, something that's pretty small, very light, gives you that protected area every night, but it is something that you need to set up. So you are investing that 10, 15 minutes before bed and before you break camp. So if you're looking for just an all-purpose, I want to go hike the Appalachian Trail sometimes, I want to go hike in the High Sierra sometimes, I want to go up to Alaska, I think that the shelter that I would recommend to someone would be a full-sided mid. So I'm thinking of something like the Mountain Laurel Design Solo Mid, and I would go with the XL version because for that marginal amount of extra weight versus the original Solo Mid, it's totally worth that extra interior volume. And then you can pair that tarp, which basically is a pyramid-shaped tarp, with a number of inners. So you could use the dedicated inner, which I think they call the inner net. You could also use a bivy sack. If you could use it in the wintertime and you don't need any inner at all, or you could get a full, what do they call them? The winter inners that have the very breathable fabric, very breathable polyester sides to keep the spindrift out. So that modularity gives you the option of always having an optimized shelter for every condition that you're going to be experiencing.
I'm going to rapid fire some tents your way, and I want to know who you think they're for and what's your take on them.
I've seen a lot of these. I have a lot of clients who use them. Fantastic performance for the weights, very generous one-person shelter and light enough to be one, a cozier two-person. Being able to pull the head and foot out on the side panels really helps with interior space. So really good shelter just all around. I've seen a lot of these. Huge footprints, which can be a problem in areas that aren't known to have big camping areas. Thinking of something like in the Appalachians. Very generous one-person size shelter, so great for environments where you're going to be dealing with inclement weather and want a large space to go hide out in during those times. The asymmetrical sleeping position solves some issues. So for example, you don't have that low sloping sidewall that you have with other mids, but it creates others, and one of the others would be that if you're new to it, it's going to be a little weird trying to figure out how to set up the shelter relative to where you want to sleep. This is a great casual backpacker shelter, really easy to set up, double doors for either two people or for just cross ventilation, foolproof pitch. I would say this would be great for, this would be the type of shelter that I would bring if I was going to go backpacking with my wife. I've seen a few of these. I haven't slept in one. I think when I look at it, I think this is one of those shelters that really struggles with that low angle, especially on the foot side. If you look at the silhouette, the foot just really kind of tapers off slowly. So I think you're kind of ripe to have some condensation issues at the foot of your sleeping bag. I also don't get the sense that there's great airflow through that, but it's a really lightweight shelter for one person, and it has all the protections that you need. I have seen it perform up in Alaska. It seems to do the trick. I've used the HMG Mid a bunch the last couple of seasons. For 16 ounces, part of the reason I keep carrying it, I don't love it. There's some issues with it that I have. One, I think it's just a little too small, at least for a 6 foot tall person. But for 16 ounces, it's storm-worthy, insect protection, super waterproof, decent ventilation when I can leave the doors open. So I am waiting for HMG to come out with a HMG Mid XL. I thankfully get to experiment with a bunch of different shelters. The last couple of years I've used the HMG Mid quite a bit. I've used the Mountain Laurel Design Solo Mid XL quite a bit. The Seek Outside Silexes quite a bit. I've used some hammocks. So I think it's important for me to keep on experimenting, and that way I can kind of speak to them a little bit more. I will say that just with shelters and also with backpacks and other equipment, I really gravitate towards the all-around product. Like I want for like just the whole season, I want to be able to grab one shelter, and I want it to work in southern Utah. I want it to work in Alaska. I want it to work in the High Sierra. I want it to work in Yellowstone. I want it to work in West Virginia. It just makes life easy. And I think if my situation was different, if I was going to say through hike another long trail, I would get something that was very niche and very built for that specific trail. But I think for most everyone else, just one good all-around shelter that you can use anywhere. So one of my sayings is to my clients, I say that, especially with trekking pole tents, is I say that your shelter is only as good as your weakest stake. Because with trekking pole tents, if a stake pulls, like there's nothing, it's just going to collapse. It's going to be just like a wet blanket. It'll just fall down on the ground. So don't discount the importance of stakes. The stakes that I've been using, this is the reason it's bent, because it's pretty old at this point. Nail stakes are great. My other favorite are the aluminum Y stakes, but in general, I'm looking for don't be like stupid ultralight on your stakes. For some reason, I have one of these. This is like one of those mini groundhogs. Stupid ultralight. Not a lot of holding power, just not worth it. You might as well just carry the extra, like 1/3 of an ounce, maybe half of an ounce, and get something that's really going to hold ground. I also want something that, in addition to holding power, something that I can just pound in with a rock. So I'm going to grab whenever there's water in this. Whenever I get to my campsite, I want to be able to put it in a 15-degree angle and grab I call it a stake rock. It should be like baseball size, and I want to basically just hammer that into the ground. 15 degrees, that's kind of the key thing there. And the reason I like to use a stake rock as opposed to like my foot is you're just going to get a much cleaner purchase. So it's going to penetrate deeply and cleanly without loosening up all the soil around it, which might really just especially help on the margins. As far as guylines go, you can go with the really ultralight stuff. So this is like really thin. I think this is that Spectracord. So the acronym I mentioned earlier is UHMWPE. I don't know what that stands for in chemistry, but that's the acronym for like off-brand Dyneema. So you can go with stuff like this, really strong, but it's kind of difficult to work with just because it's so thin. So a better guyline for most people is going to be something in like the 2.5 millimeter thickness, and get something that has some reflection on it. It's nice to be able to see it at night. This is plenty strong. It is a little bit heavier, but I think that the ability to tie knots in it and be able to work with it, even if your hands are cold, or maybe even if you have gloved hands, is worth the little weight trade-off. Thank you very much for watching. This is part of a weekly series that I do with the Trek. If you have other topics that you'd like me to cover, please leave a comment below. And if you thought today's video was helpful and informative, please consider joining me on one of my guided trips. We'll see you next week.